Kyle Seymour, Bedford Ave. So I realize this isn't a Q&A, obviously. I'm not going to rehash everything that I said at the last meeting. You know, I keep hearing that we want to have a policy for all children. Unfortunately, this policy only focuses on one type of child while disregarding the rights and privacy of all others. Okay, so I think there's got to be some common ground here potentially for us to come together on, because as this policy is currently constructed, it is very one-sided, and there are First Amendment infringements. There are parental rights infringements. I had submitted 20-something questions to the superintendent as well as the board, and I did get a couple of responses, and I'd like to read one of them back and ask the board if this is something that they support. Is this a policy that the board is in favor of? And it was, I asked the question, I highlighted in section 3, guidance A, privacy. School personnel should not disclose information that may reveal a student's transgender status or gender nonconforming presentation to others, including parents. So I have kind of a two-pronged question. I could see this being applied not in just this policy, but in any policy, right? Any situation where a student would be talking with a counselor, I would interpret that as saying that there would be information withheld from parents. Now, there is the FERPA, the Family Educational Parental Rights Act, which again, I'll reiterate, unless there's abuse happening, the student is a minor. They cannot legally enter into a contract with a counselor, who, by the way, is an employee of the district, therefore is an employee of the taxpayers. So the response that I got from the superintendent was, so I asked, how is this not a blatant violation of parental rights? And I got the answer, even with the legal issues involved, from an ethical standpoint, I just want to highlight that word ethical. Legality will trump ethics every single time, because the law is the law. Whether it's ethical or not, if it's a law, it's going to trump ethics. From an ethical standpoint, the school's counselor's client is the student. The parent's needs are considered, but the needs of the student come first above all others. So again, my question to the board, do you agree, is that the policy of this district, that you would hold that student-counselor relationship above the student-parent relationship? I did send that to all of you. I got the response from Superintendent Beitler. I'll have to send it out again. If he did say that he was going to vet the questions that I submitted through the board. So then, like I said, I'll assume that you guys are in favor of that. That is the position of this board. And I just want some clarity on that, because there are clear legal implications here. If information is withheld from parents regarding a minor child, okay, that child cannot enter into a contract with a counselor. That counselor is an employee of the district. They do not have that legal standing. So again, I have that, I guess, an open question to the board. I will resubmit my questions and hopefully get a more detailed answer as to whether in pertaining to this policy, but to any situation that a student might go before a counselor, whether it's drug use, whether they got pregnant. The parent-student relationship trumps all of that. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point out from some of the questions that I received back. Another question that I asked was, is any part of this policy also applicable to the general public? The response I received was, I will need to have more clarification on this question. All of our policies are for the general public once they are approved by the Gilford School Board. So that would tell me that if this policy were to go into effect, it would apply to the general public. And is that the intent of this policy and what the school board wants? I will say this, yes, this law, SB 263, was signed by Governor Sununu. I actually had the opportunity to bump shoulders with him about a month ago, and I actually asked him about this. I tried to follow up with his office, haven't gotten much back yet, but he said this to me. That was not the intent of this law, this policy, okay? SB 263 doesn't say anything of this specificity that is outlined in this JBAB policy.
We've reached 5 minutes, so just, could you wrap it up?
Yes, sir. I apologize. Yep. There's obviously a lot to chew on here. The last thing that I just want to ask or point out is this. In the Section 2 definitions, one of the definitions is gender fluid. So my question is, how do you discern between somebody who truly is transgender, okay, and obviously we want to try to respect those people and accommodate to the best of our abilities, versus someone who's just posing as a transgender? Now you might say, well, that's you're just fear-mongering. I keep hearing that things are rooted in fear. Yet, if you look, you can quick search on the internet, right? There's all these stories now coming out of the UK. The UK and Canada, they're about 15, 20 years beyond where we are in these types of situations. And there are now a term called trans trending, because it's trendy to pose as a transgender. So again, how will you discern the difference between someone who truly is transgender and who believes that in their heart and someone who's trying to take advantage of this policy?
Please resubmit them to Mr. Beitler, and he'll consult with the board as well as our attorney and give a revised answer.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Lynn Barron, Gibbon Drive, Gilford. I know there's always a lot of gray areas in any topic of discussion, including this one, but you know, the fact here is that there's a law in the state of New Hampshire that bans discrimination based on gender identity. I fully support gender inclusion in this district. You know, times have changed and we understand a lot more than we did years ago about, you know, transgender and LGBTQ, and that this is not something that somebody just wakes up and says, oh, I think today. It's really truly who they are. We can't really change a law here in this room, but what we can do is put aside our discomfort and fears about transgender, particularly those fears based on misinformation and baseless facts without any statistic or evidence to back them. Being transgender isn't a choice. That's the real truth. But we can also remember that at the center of it all are children. Children who need our support, compassion, understanding, and kindness. A child who is willing to truly accept who they are is probably braver than any of us in this room. Because it's really difficult to be true to ourselves. I think all of us at some point in time probably didn't stand up for something we believed in because we were afraid of what other people might think. One of the things I've most admired about this community is how we've always come together when a family needs our support, particularly when a child is involved. Well, here's one of those times. We need to rally behind these families. They need our empathy and they need our support. This is new territory, but we can navigate it together. Most issues are only issues when we make them issues. One of my daughters attended a college where all the bathrooms on campus were non-gender specific. Every single bathroom, and it was never an issue. As for other topics like sports, this debate began long ago. It's already happening. It has nothing to do with gender identity. There are girls playing football, there are boys playing field hockey, all across this country and right here in New Hampshire. There are far more pressing issues facing the health and safety of our children in this community right now, and we should reserve our discussions for those topics that, you know, no one seems to want to acknowledge. Thank you.
Hi, Anna Benavides from 60 Ridgewood Ave. My 12-year-old daughter is currently at St. Bonnie School and will go to Gilford High School in a few years. She's in middle school. I want her to go to a school that treats students as people, not as dangers to their classmates. I mentioned the word danger because of what I heard people say at the last board meeting. Some say they were concerned about the safety of their children if a transgender person were to use the bathroom and/or locker room of the gender that they identify with, rather than the gender they were born with. My husband and I have done our best to raise our daughter as someone who has an open mind and treats people based on their actions, not their gender or appearance. The policy supports our values as This policy supports our values as a family. I've been a school librarian for 5 years. One of my students, when I first started teaching, who I'll call David, was in the midst of transitioning to the gender she identified with. I taught David in 1st and 2nd grade. All students who interacted with David enjoyed her sense of humor and how sweet she was. However, they were confused because David had a boy's name, but dressed and looked like a girl. David was required to use the nurse's bathroom. This also confused classmates because kids who used our nurse's bathroom usually were the ones who couldn't be trusted to behave in the main bathroom. When you are a kid, being different often makes you an outsider, lonely, someone who could be bullied. Even though teachers and parents teach their kids that being different is what makes us all so interesting and unique, the separation was a negative act. Not only was David isolated, but also treated by her peers like she had done something wrong. As a K-8 school librarian, I constantly teach and turn to good research methods. We all know that we cannot trust everything we see, hear, or read these days. So I use a wide variety of methods in my curriculum to teach students about how to be skeptical, search for facts, to find true news. And that's what I found that's what I did when trying to understand some of my neighbors' points of view on the issue. I didn't understand why they thought the way they did, and I wanted to understand so that I could see both sides of the picture. I found out that 19 schools in New Hampshire have had policies nearly identical to the policy that you're proposing in place since 2015, and there has never once been a negative incident related to transgendered students. This statistic alone is enough to convince me that no harm will come to any students when this policy is adapted. At the last meeting, people stated that they wanted to do what was best for all of our kids. I agree, and this policy is what's best for them all.
Croc TV.